I'm Zanete and I'm the designer behind Zanete Knits. Welcome to another one of my pattern deep dives, this time on a pattern called Consonance Sweater that I made for my husband. I am wearing it, but it's way too big for me. And here's a photo of what it looks like when it fits. And in this video, I'll talk more about the inspiration and the yarn, gauge and needles that I used, the sizing, the techniques used and the construction of the sweater, and also touch on some possible modifications that you could do. I drew the inspiration from our relationship. I know what he likes to wear. He chooses very classical items. He wouldn't want too much texture and likes dark colors, so I had to play with that. But I also wanted it to be an engaging knit for me, so a black all over stockinette wasn't an option because I would get bored after the first few rows. So I chose something with a bit more texture so that I would also like to knit it. And for that texture to come through, it needs to be in a color other than black. And so it's still dark, and I think it's the best of both worlds. I had already made a crew neck for him in the Daddy Son sweater, and he still wears that, so it was time for a v-neck. And here is a take on a v-neck. It's a double folded neckband that's folded over. I can put my finger in here close. So that's what it looks like up close. And I am using a fingering weight yarn from Ushitita. It's their merino singles in colorway Factum. I picked this up in Barcelona Knitting Festival a couple of years ago, and it finally came to life in this project. And I am using slightly larger needles than recommended to get a larger gauge, because if I was to use the recommended gauge and needles, it would take me so much longer to make this sweater. So the gauge is 24 stitches times 32 rows in 10 by 10 centimeter or 4 by 4 inches. And I used 3.25 millimeter needles for the main fabric, that is US 3. And for the neckband, hem and cuffs, I used 2.75 millimeters, that is US 2. And obviously use whatever needle size gets you the gauge, because in this project the gauge is important. Not just the stitch gauge, but also getting the row gauge is important. The whole sweaters work seamlessly from the top down, including the set-in sleeve that is shaped with short rows. And we start by picking up the stitches around the armhole, and we need to shape the cap. And the calculations for the cap shaping and the number of rows that we have around here is very tightly linked to all of the shaping instructions. You might struggle to adjust the pattern if your row gauge doesn't match, because if you need to work more or less rows to get the right side depth, it would be a bit of a problem to shape the cap for the sleeve afterwards. It's not to say that it can't be done, it's just a lot more maths will be involved to adjust the cap shaping if you adjust the side length here, which is why the row gauge is just as important as the stitch gauge. In terms of yarn, so I really think merino singles is really great. My husband doesn't like scratchy yarns, so this was really soft and he enjoys wearing it. But I believe that any fingering weight yarn would work here. You could try sport as long as it's still drapey, because if you pick a thicker yarn that creates denser fabric, and if by any chance you pick a size that is too large, looking at the shoulder to shoulder measurement, then you could see that my shoulders would be sticking out, especially where there's the decreases in short rows here. it would make it look like a balloon more. So my recommendation is to get drapey fingering weight yarn for this project. And it comes in 9 sizes, and the recommended ease is 10 to 15 centimeters or 4 to 6. I am wearing it with a lot more ease than recommended because it's not made for me. But the finished chest circumference for the first size is 92 centimeters, that's 36 3/4 inches. And for the largest size, size 9, it's 170.5 centimeters. That is 68 1/4 inches. I've already mentioned a few techniques that are used, but as I go through the construction, I might be repeating myself, but just to provide a complete picture, I'll go through all of them again. So the sweater is worked seamlessly from the top down. We start with the back and we cast on just the neck stitches, and then we slowly increase the back. That creates this line here with lifted increases, and when we reach the full width for the back, the shoulder to shoulder width, we work straight down to where we need to start shaping the armholes with additional increases to the full width of the back at the bust. So when we get to the armpits, we put the back stitches on hold and we pick up stitches along the shoulder for each of the fronts separately, and then we work the fronts with increases here to shape the V-neck until we meet in the center, and then both fronts are joined to work in one piece flat down to where we need to work the armhole increases for the front. And we do the same as we did for the back. And then we're ready to join the back and front and start working in the round. There are fake purl seams on the sides of the body as well as the sleeve, just to add some more structure to it. And what I forgot to mention is that on the back as well as the both fronts, there is a panel of a knit purl stitch pattern. That is what I chose to include to make it more engaging for me, so that it wasn't just stuck in it. And if I come up close, it's very simple. There's some purling and some twisted stitches, but very, very plain and keeping a very minimal look. In terms of the increases, I am using lifted increases, but you can substitute them for make one right and make one left, as long as you keep the direction, the right leaning and left leaning. Some people experienced some holes forming if they use lifted increases because of too much stretching. So you can substitute the increases as well. And I'm using lifted increases throughout for increasing the shoulder as well as for the armhole shaping. Because we didn't do any neckline shaping at the back, after we've picked up the stitches along the shoulder seam, we knit a section of the front shoulder straight, that then extends the back and creates the neckline for the back. So some of the front shoulders become back shoulders. That's why there's more rows to be knit for the front than the back. But I can assure you that when you join in the round, the extra front length will just fall back and create that neckline for the back. So after we've joined in the round and we continue to work in the round, it's a little bit trickier to read the chart because it's no longer have to be read from, from right to left and then from left to right on the wrong side. So you always read the chart from right to left. And it's harder to keep track of the chart rows worked, but it's a very minor issue, a non-issue. And when you're happy with the length of the sweater, you can start working on the hem, adjust that as long as you wish as well. And I guess the most complicated or the most interesting and the most engaging part are the sleeves, especially the cap shaping, where you, as I said before, pick up all the stitches and then adjust the stitch count in the next round, and then you start working short rows back and forth along the top of the sleeve cap to shape it. There are sections where you work some decreases to reduce the stitch count, because our upper arm circumference isn't the same as the total size circumference, so we need both work short rows as well as reduce the number of stitches. And once we get to the armhole, we then work a typical sleeve down to cuffs with some decreases to taper and reduce the circumference for the wrist. And finally we add the neckband. I guess you could add the neckband before you do the sleeves or before you even finish the body if you wanted to see what it will look like and stop the rolling of the fabric. And that's done as well by picking up stitches along the neckline and working a 2x2 rib to twice the desired height of the neckband, and then it's folded inwards and joined to the base at the same time as binding off. There's a link to a video tutorial on how to do that. And then the only part that is seamed in this project is attaching this side of the neckband to the base of the neck opening here to create this fold over. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I guess some modifications I can talk about. One of the test knitters created this really interesting project from this pattern. She was using intarsia, and the panels that are the purl stitch, knit purl stitch panels were in a gray color, and the rest of the sweater was in variegated, really bright neon colors. I suggest you go check that out on Ravelry. And I know from her that it was quite involved. You really had to have a lot of motivation to keep all the strands, to manage them well, and that it took a lot longer, but it did create something extraordinary. I myself would not found the motivation to do that undertaking, but it's possible. So yeah, if that's something that you'd like to try, by all means reach out to her on Ravelry and get some insights. I don't actually know how to do intarsia in the round. That's something I've postponed for the future. And to me, it just seems impossible, but apparently not. But on a lighter note, there are many modifications you could do because it's worked from the top down. You can adjust the length of the sleeves and make it short sleeve, or even make it into a vest, or cropped, or make it into a dress if you like. And you can adjust the hem and the cuff lengths just as easily. You can change up the ribbing pattern from 2x2 to something that is more fancy for you. Another interesting thing could be skipping the purl stitch panels altogether and just knitting, working stockinette over those areas. If you wanted a more of a TV project, or you wanted a plainer look and for a even better wardrobe staple. You could also play with the neckband here. You could make it just a single layer, or you could omit the necessary seaming here and work a central double decrease along the center here, working a traditional V-neck neckband. And I guess that is probably it in terms of modifications. I know I made this for the male dimensions, so the sleeves are slightly longer and the shoulders are slightly broader than I would do normally, but it's just as much a unisex pattern as any, as long as you pay attention to the shoulder to shoulder width when you choose your size, because that should be matching the wearer shoulder to shoulder. The schematics show you where that measurement starts and ends. And if you have narrower shoulders, for the size that matches the shoulder to shoulder measurement, the chest circumference is too narrow, you can add more stitches here at the underarm when casting on, when joining the front and back, keeping in mind that you will have more sleeve stitches to work with at the underarm as well, and more sleeve stitches to decrease, but that is an option to adjust it for a more narrower shoulder, larger chest option. And yes, pay attention to the sleeve length because they are longer. So if you want shorter sleeves, you might need to increase the cadence of the sleeve decreases if you want to complete all the decreases, but you could stop midway and then just change to an even smaller size needle for the cuff to bring it in. And that is it, all about the Consonance Sweater that's coming out on the 27th of March. You can download the pattern from the link that is included in the description. And if you are a newsletter subscriber before the official release date, then you will receive a special intro discount. I hope you found this useful, and happy knitting!